In what ways did money affect your family negatively? My dad chose his girlfriend over us, so we had to kick him out. A year later, he lost his money, and she ditched him as soon as she found out. He came right back to us, but it wasn't like we'd be a family again. When my dad's business first took off, I was on top of the world. Suddenly we could afford food, and the kids at school stopped making fun of my clothes. Dad got us a bigger house where we each had our own rooms and always had hot water. Things looked great, and at first I thought they were. Of course, Dad got really into his image, dressing up all the time and going out almost every night. I didn't realize how messed up it was until I saw Mom crying. She told me through her tears that Dad had canceled their anniversary dinner for some work thing. I was only 12, but I knew that wasn't right. Then things got worse. Dad met this woman, Serena, at that meeting he ditched the anniversary for. Serena was young and beautiful, and she knew how to work a room. In a few weeks, Dad said he was leaving Mom to marry Serena. I lost it and yelled at him. I told him Mom was there when he had nothing, and Serena just showed up. He couldn't leave Mom for some Barbie doll he'd just met. But he didn't care. He told Mom, in front of us, that someone of his level needed a woman who took care of herself, like Serena did. I felt so mad when I saw Mom quietly packing her bags. Serena moved in a few days later, and things got rough fast. Serena and Dad were always taking fancy trips, leaving me and my siblings alone for weeks with full-time nannies. When they were home, we barely saw them. Serena and Dad were always out riding horses, tasting wine, enjoying all the fancy stuff. We wanted to join them, and Dad seemed happy, but Serena always shut us down. She clearly didn't like us, and Dad always did whatever she said. What's worse, I knew Serena didn't like us because we cost Dad money. School fees, activities, it all bugged her. One night, she even told me to stop taking his money because it was for her, not me. I tried to talk to Dad about it, but he accused me of hating Serena because she replaced Mom. That's when I knew I couldn't get through to him. Then the problems with Dad and Serena living their lifestyle started. Before long, money got tight. Their fancy trips turned into cheap hotel stays and takeout replaced fancy dinners. Serena did not take it well. At dinner, she would make fun of Dad for being cheap and complain about the less expensive jewelry he was buying. Dad looked embarrassed, trying to keep her happy and apologizing like crazy. Around this time, Dad started pulling us from our private schools and canceling our activities so he could spend the money on Serena. My little sister cried because she lost her spot on the gymnastics team, and my brother just shut down. When I talked to Dad about how much he was hurting us, he barely reacted. He only cared about Serena. One night, during dinner, Dad announced he'd taken money from our college fund because Serena needed a vacation to relax. That's when we knew we had to leave. The next day, Mom welcomed us back. Her house was small, but it felt like we have a home again. Our days were simple again, doing homework at the kitchen table and laughing at dinner. Mom never said anything bad about Dad, but sometimes I saw her looking sad when she thought we weren't looking. A year went by. We didn't hear much from Dad, and we didn't care. Then one night, Dad showed up, looking like he'd aged a decade. His clothes were ratty, and his eyes were tired. Mom hesitated but let him in. He sat on the edge of our old couch, staring at his hands. Slowly, he told us everything. He said his business had gone bankrupt and that he was out of money. Then he started crying, calling himself an idiot. He admitted that the second he had no money, Serena had dumped him. She didn't even comfort him. She just packed her bags as soon as he told her. It was sad to see our dad like that. He was all cried out and embarrassed. He asked for a second chance, not just from us, but from Mom too. He wanted us to be a family again. Mom sat there quietly for a long time. My sister, Emma, who's 15, was crying. My brother Liam, who's 10, just stared at the floor. I'm 17 now, and I was torn. Part of me wanted to tell Dad to get lost after everything he'd done. The other part remembered when he used to push me on the swings. Finally, Mom spoke. She said Dad could crash on our couch for a few nights while he got things sorted out. Not like we'd all be a family again, but just to be nice. Dad looked relieved but disappointed. I think he thought we'd welcome him back with open arms. That night was so awkward. Dad tried to make small talk during dinner, asking about school and stuff. We gave short answers. Mom was polite but distant. After dinner, I helped Mom with dishes while Dad tried to bond with Emma and Liam. It wasn't going well. Later, I overheard Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen. Dad was apologizing again, saying how stupid he'd been. Mom wasn't having it. She told him his actions had consequences, and he couldn't just come back expecting everything to be okay. I was proud of her. The next morning, I woke up early for school and found Dad already up making breakfast. Pancakes, my favorite from when I was little. I knew he was trying, but it felt fake, like he thought pancakes could fix everything. I grabbed a granola bar instead and left early. At school, I couldn't focus. My friend Jaden knew something was up, so I told him everything over lunch. He thought I should give Dad a chance, but he didn't get it. His parents have been happily married forever. When I got home, I found Dad fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom. Mom was at work, and Emma and Liam weren't home yet. It was just us. He tried to chat, asking about my college plans. I gave short answers while grabbing a snack. Then, Dad dropped a bomb. He said he'd been thinking about how to make things right. He'd found some expensive jewelry of Serena's that she'd left behind, and he was going to sell it and put the money toward our college funds. I just stared at him. Part of me was thankful he was trying, but the other part wondered if Serena would come after him. I just nodded and went to my room to do homework. That night at dinner, Dad told everyone his plan. Mom looked worried and asked if it was even legal. Dad said Serena has left it behind. Emma seemed hopeful, but Mom wasn't convinced. She privately discussed and disapproved, saying Dad couldn't take this decision without consulting. Their voices got louder until Mom told him to lower his voice. The next day was Saturday. Dad said we should go to the park like we used to. Mom said she had errands, but we could go if we wanted. Liam seemed excited, which surprised me. Emma said she had homework. I went, mostly to keep an eye on Liam. At the park, Dad tried too hard, pushing Liam on the swings, paying us ice cream. I just gave short answers, but Liam was warming up to him. Then Dad's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and stepped away to answer, but I could still hear him. It was Serena. She was yelling about her jewelry. Dad tried to calm her down, saying they could talk about it. When he came back, he looked stressed, but tried to act normally. On the way home, Dad got another call, this time from someone named Marcus. Dad's voice got all shaky as he said he just needed more time to pay something back. When he hung up, I asked who Marcus was. Dad said it was just business, but I knew he was lying. When we got home, Mom was waiting with a strange look. She told me a woman had shown up looking for Dad. Tall, blonde, and mad. Serena. Mom had told her Dad wasn't living there, just visit. Serena didn't believe her and had threatened to come back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad's phone calls and Serena's visit. Things just weren't right. Around midnight, I heard the front door. Click, then thump as it closed. I quietly went to my window and peeked out. I saw Dad rushing down the street. He met someone in a car parked a block away. They talked. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Dad was gesturing a lot. After about 10 minutes, Dad came back, looking even more stressed than before. The next morning, while we were eating breakfast, Dad said he had a job interview coming up. Mom acted surprised, but she said that was great, and, of course, she would support him. The second Dad was out the door, Mom told us she was really worried. She'd found a crumpled up note in the trash. It looked like a list of gambling debts. A name, Marcus Delgado, was at the top. I decided I needed to investigate. When Mom went to the store, I checked Dad's duffel bag. Inside, I found a pawn shop receipt for a diamond bracelet. He got way less than what that thing had to be worth. I also saw a text on his phone from Marcus, sounding nasty, like he was demanding Dad pay him back. That's when it clicked. Dad wasn't just short on cash because Serena spent all his money. He had gambling debts. He was acting all nice and spending time with us because he needed someplace safe while he tried to figure things out. The whole family reunion thing, it was a lie. When Dad got back from his interview, I cornered him in the kitchen. I asked him straight up, did he know a Marcus? Was he gambling? Dad's face went white. He acted all surprised, then got mad that I'd gone through his bag. The gig was up, though, and he finally admitted everything. The truth was that, as his business started hurting, Dad had been gambling. He thought he could win big and save everything. He lost, borrowed from some scary guys, and now they wanted their cash. Serena hadn't left because the money all disappeared. It was because these guys had shown up at their door. Dad came to us not because he missed us. It was as a place to hide. He looked so upset as he told the story. It made me sick to think about it. I was furious. It felt like he had punched me in the face. I left the kitchen and slammed my door, and the picture of our old vacation fell off the wall. The glass broke across Dad's face in the photo. My hands were shaking, so I texted Emma to come to my room, quick. She showed up a minute later with wet hair. She looked concerned and asked me what was wrong. I told her everything as fast as I could manage, what Dad had really been up to, her eyes growing wider when I mentioned Marcus Delgado. We both knew we had to tell Mom, even though she was already dealing with so much. Mom got home about an hour later from the diner. I heard as she put her keys by the door and kicked off her shoes. We brought her to her room and told her everything. She sat on her bed, and the mattress dipped under her. Her face was getting paler and paler. She just stared at the floor, rubbing her hands, the rough spots on them. She got those sores from working so hard when Dad left. "I need to speak to your father," she said finally. That was a voice I had never heard her use. I was scared. We went to the family room where Dad was watching TV with Liam. Some cartoon was on, and Liam was laughing. He didn't have any clue what was about to happen. Mom told Liam to go play for a few minutes. He looked confused but said, "Okay." He looked back at us as he left, like he knew something was going on. As soon as Liam was gone, Mom went off. She didn't yell. I almost wish she had. Instead, she said things quietly, asking Dad how he could do this to us. How could he put us in danger? She took her time and said exactly what she wanted to. Dad said stuff, trying to say it wasn't a big deal, that these guys weren't dangerous, just acted mad. But he couldn't even look at her. Mom wasn't buying it. She told him he had one day to work it all out, or she was going to call the cops. Dad told her not to. He said it would be worse, that these people wouldn't like the cops getting involved. The way he said it got across to me how much trouble he was in. That night, dinner was awful. The only sounds were forks on plates. Liam tried to talk, but everyone was too upset. Liam just kept looking around. He saw the meatloaf sitting in Dad's plate, untouched. I helped Mom with the dishes, and Dad sat on the couch looking at his phone. He was jumping his leg and tapping his fingers. Later, I heard Dad in the bathroom, talking on the phone. He was trying to keep his voice down so we wouldn't notice. He sounded desperate to me. He was talking to someone named Keith, begging for a loan. "I know I asked already, but this time," he was saying. "These guys aren't playing around, Keith." He sounded like he was about to cry. From what I heard, Keith wasn't going to help at all. Dad was going and going and going. He said everything he was going to do if he had the money. When he came out of the bathroom, he wouldn't look at me as he walked by. The next morning, Dad was gone before anyone woke up. It was weird to not have him around, not hearing him breathe in the house. He left a note. It said he was meeting with someone who might give him some assistance to fix things. Mom shook her head. Her face said she didn't want to trust him. She called a friend who was a lawyer and got some assistance. She walked around the kitchen all morning with a coffee that she just didn't drink. Around noon, the doorbell rang. It scared me. Mom checked out the peephole and she got all tense. She told us to go to our rooms. I acted like I was going to, but I kept myself close so I could see. Mom opened the door a little bit and blocked the doorway so no one could see in. It was Serena. She didn't look how I remembered. She was upset. Her clothes were all wrinkled, and her hair up in a messy ponytail. She wanted to know where Dad went. She said that he stole things from her. She said that he pawned her bracelet. Mom started closing her door, but Serena stopped it with her boot. That was a 20 grand bracelet. He got maybe 3 for it. Her tone sounded sick, like after shouting all night. "I want the rest of my things before he sells them too." Her nails were all chipped and nasty looking. Mom told her to deal with it with Dad and went back to closing the door. Serena had to push it to speak. "Those people he owes money to? They think I'm involved. They followed me yesterday. Do you get the kind of people they are?" I almost felt sorry for her. That's when I couldn't stay back anymore, and I exited the door. I wanted to know how we were in now. Mom looked angry and worried at the same time, but Serena answered. Maybe she wanted someone else to know how dangerous things had gotten. "Your dad is in business with Marcus Delgado. He runs a poker game out of the Italian restaurant on 4th Street. Your dad gambled and lost everything and borrowed more cash. Marcus doesn't do payment plans." She laughed like she was sick. "He does broken fingers or tires cut up if you don't pay." Mom managed to shut the door, but not until Serena had screamed that she would be back with the police if she didn't get her stuff. Mom leaned against the door. She seemed drained, the look on her face. "Pack a bag," she said. Her tone was low. "We're staying at Aunt Carol's tonight." There wasn't anything else to say. I texted Emma to meet us all at Aunt Carol's. Mom called Liam to come inside. He had been playing in the yard. Within an hour, we were in the car. Mom wrote a note for Dad. She did fine. Aunt Carol lived in an apartment on the other side of town, in a secured building. She let us in and hugged us. She looked worried when Mom said the truth. That night, we were all in the apartment, Liam and I in the small sofa. Emma was stuck on an air mattress that slowly went flat as the night dragged on, and Mom ended up in Aunt Carol's guest room. I just couldn't sleep. The shadows on the ceiling were weird and unfamiliar, and my mind kept running wild, imagining all the worst possible things that could happen. Around midnight, Mom's phone rang, and the sound cut through the quiet apartment like a knife. It was Dad. I pretended I was asleep, but I was totally eavesdropping on Mom's side of the talk. She was whispering, but I could still hear every word in that small space. Dad was freaking out because we weren't at home. Mom told him we were safe. She told him that he needs to solve his messes. "I'm not telling you where we are," she said, sounding firm. "Not until I know for sure that we're all safe." After she hung up, I heard her crying softly. She was doing everything she could to hide it, but I could still hear her muffled sobs. It hit me hard because it was the first time I'd heard her cry since Dad left us 3 years back. The next morning, Mom gathered us together and told us we'd be crashing at Aunt Carol's for a few days until Dad got his issues settled. Liam started to cry, asking if the bad guys were going to hurt Dad. His face was all scrunched up, and he looked so scared. It reminded me he was too little to get what was really going on. Mom hugged him tight and tried to say that Dad was going to be okay. But I could tell she wasn't so sure. She wouldn't even look Emma in the eyes, and that made me know that the situation was critical. Later that day, Dad showed up at Aunt Carol's. I was shocked that he'd found us, even though Mom admitted that she'd texted him the location after he called, sounding super desperate. He looked like he'd been through hell. He was unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing the same clothes he wore yesterday. Aunt Carol reluctantly let him in, but she stood with her arms crossed the whole time. She was being clear that she blamed him for putting her sister and nieces and nephew in this mess. Dad told us he had worked out a plan to fix everything. He'd contacted his old business partner, Trevor, who had agreed to loan him enough money to pay off Marcus. Trevor was the voice of reason when they ran the business. He was the one who advised not to expand too fast. Dad should have taken his advice. Mom asked how he planned to pay Trevor back. She sounded skeptical. Dad said he'd gotten a job at Trevor's new company. It wasn't fancy, it was like starting over at the bottom, but at least it was good, honest work with a steady paycheck. Mom seemed a bit relieved, but still skeptical. I felt some of the tension releasing from her shoulders. Just as things started becoming calm, Dad's phone went off. It was that generic ringtone. His face went pale when he saw who was calling. He stepped out into the hallway to answer, but the walls in Aunt Carol's apartment were thin. It was Marcus. He didn't sound happy. Dad kept saying he'd have the money tomorrow, asking for just one more day. I could hear his voice. He was taking a pleading tone that made me feel so bad. When he came back in, he looked green. His hands were shaking as he shoved the phone back in his pocket. "They know I'm here," he said quietly. "I need to leave." His eyes darted towards the window, watching the parking lot. That's when I lost it. All of the years of built-up annoyance came spilling out. I yelled at Dad that he was putting us all in danger because he was making stupid mistakes. My voice cracked with emotion. I told him off for abandoning us for Serena, his new girlfriend. How he left us struggling just to get by. Now he was dragging us into his gambling mess. Mom tried to calm me down, putting her hand on my arm, but I had too much history. I told Dad that I wish he never came back. The words hung there, and I couldn't take them back. He looked heartbroken with humiliation and pain all mixed together. I felt bad, but I was still too hurt and too mad to apologize. He nodded, said sorry, and left. He looked defeated. Mom followed him into the hallway. I couldn't hear what they said, but when she came back, her eyes were bloodshot, and she tried not to look at me. I couldn't sleep that night. The pull-out couch was super uncomfortable, and every spring poked me in the back. I couldn't stop thinking about Dad being out there, possibly in danger. Despite everything, he was still my father. He taught me to ride a bike before he left. He never missed a school play. Around 2 a.m., I check phone. There was a text from him. "I'm sorry for everything. I love you kids more than you'll ever know." It had been sent an hour before. It sounded like a goodbye note. I woke Mom up and showed her the text. She called him immediately. It went straight to voicemail. She called again and again, but it kept going to voicemail. That is when I saw her movements turning into desperate moves. She called the police to report him as potentially crazy. They took the info, but they didn't seem to care. The officer's voice was bored when he said that adults run off all the time, especially when they are facing financial hardships. The next morning, we still hadn't heard from Dad. Mom was losing her mind, pacing back and forth in Aunt Carol's small living room. She called everyone she could think of who might know where Dad went. She called Trevor, whose number she found in Dad's old contact list. The list was on the phone he had left behind years before. Trevor hadn't seen or heard from Dad since yesterday afternoon. Trevor told Mom that he had offered Dad a job and a loan, but Dad needed to visit to sign the documents. "Tell him to contact me," Trevor said. "The offer stands." Mom decided to go look for Dad. Aunt Carol stayed with us kids. Mom drove around to the places Dad might be. She went to his old office building, the park where he would take us on weekends, and even Serena's house to see if his car was parked there. Hours later, she came back looking exhausted and worried. She didn't find anything. She even checked the hospital because she feared that he might have done something. Around dinner time, a knock came to the door. We froze. Aunt Carol crept up to look in the peephole. Her face turned pale. It was Marcus, a tall guy with slicked back hair and an expensive coat. The guy next to him was big and threatening, sporting a neck tattoo. Aunt Carol told us to go to the bedroom while she contacted the police. We huddled together in the bedroom with Liam. Liam grabbed onto Emma as I pressed my ear against the door to eavesdrop. We heard Marcus yelling through the door, saying that he only wanted to talk and that Dad owed him money. "I know he's staying here," he yelled. "This doesn't have to get complicated." The police were quick. We heard the sirens coming from blocks away. As the police spoke to Marcus, we listened. They told him that he was under arrest for harassment. Marcus and his friend left, but not before shouting that this wasn't over. The threat remained long after they had departed. The police officers took a statement. Mom explained everything, including that Dad was missing. They wrote down all the details and promised to look out for him. One of the officers, a woman with nice eyes, gave Mom her number. "Contact me if he shows up," she said, "or if the men follow up." That night, we were on the brink of panic. Each sound made us jump, car doors slamming, voices echoing in the hallway, along with the building's heating system starting up. Mom was sitting there with her phone in her hand. I found that she was looking at old images of us together. I could, the tears silently rolling down her face. The next morning, the police called. The police had located Dad's vehicle in the river's parking lot. My heart dropped. The fear rushed over us. Everything from my dad jumping to cold, dark waters started running through my head. Mom left to go to the station. She was shaking so bad that she dropped her keys twice. Aunt Carol made up some movies and games to make our minds feel better, but it wasn't working. Our minds were all thinking the same thing. I had the fear that pushed him over the edge. The guilt was building up. Hours later, Mom came home mad but relieved. Dad was alive. The police had found the dad alive in a cheap motel. The police found him because he had left behind his phone charger. He was afraid that Marcus would track him with his phone. He begged the police to tell us that he was okay. The new plan was that Trevor would come over and give Dad the money. He was meeting Marcus in person in a populated area. Mom yelled, "No, you're done." She said he needed to do things the right way. Maybe get a lawyer or have the cops there when they met. He said that wasn't going to work. Guys like Marcus didn't do lawyers or paperwork. It was all cash and threats. They argued for a while, and Aunt Carol took Liam out for ice cream so he wouldn't have to listen. They decided Dad would meet Marcus in the mall food court, super public, and Mom would be close by, ready to call the cops if anything went wrong. I had to go too. I couldn't stand the thought of staying behind, not knowing what was happening. They finally said I could come, but I had to stay with Aunt Carol while Mom watched from closer up. Emma and Liam had to stay at Aunt Carol's place with her neighbor watching them. Emma complained because she wanted to come too, but Mom put her foot down. "One kid in danger is enough," she said, and that was that. That night, we put the plan into action. The mall was full of people shopping after work, just like Dad wanted. He sat at a table in the food court with a coffee he didn't touch. Mom was watching from another table, about 30 feet away, pretending to be on her phone. Aunt Carol and I were near the entrance, acting like we were shopping, but keeping an eye on everything. My heart was pounding. Marcus showed up right on time, and he was alone, thank God. He looked more normal than I expected, like any businessman in his nice shirt and pants. He sat down across from Dad. I couldn't hear them, but I saw Dad slide an envelope across the table. Marcus counted what was inside, nodded, and stood up. I thought it was over. The nightmare was finally ending. I started to breathe again. Then Serena showed up out of nowhere. She must have followed Dad from Aunt Carol's apartment, knowing he'd be meeting Marcus. She stormed up to their table and started yelling at Dad. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she was red in the face and waving her hands around. Marcus looked annoyed and glanced around because people were staring. Dad tried to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. She kept pointing at the envelope that Marcus was putting in his jacket. Just then, mall security started walking over there fast, and Marcus took off into the crowd before they could get to him. Dad and Serena were still arguing when the security guard got to them. Dad tried to explain what was going on, but Serena was making a scene with everyone watching. Some people were even filming with their phones. Mom ran over to help. I couldn't help myself either. I followed, ignoring Aunt Carol calling after me. By the time I got there, Mom was trying to stand between Dad and Serena. Serena was yelling about her jewelry, saying Dad stole it. "You took everything from me," she shouted. "My jewelry, my savings, my reputation." The security guard told them all to leave. As we walked toward the exit, Serena kept following us, getting louder and more mad. In the parking lot, she grabbed Dad's arm and spun him around. Then she saw the empty envelope sticking out of his pocket, the one that had the money in it for Marcus. She realized what had happened. "You had money this whole time?" she screamed. "You told me you were broke. You owe me." Her voice echoed in the parking lot, which was almost empty. She jumped for the envelope. Dad tried to stop her, and they started struggling over it. Mom tried to pull Serena off of him. In the mess, Serena fell and hit her head on the ground with a crack. She wasn't moving, and there was blood under her hair. Everything happened so fast after that. Mom called 911, and Dad checked on Serena. She was awake but confused, looking up at the sky. The paramedics came and took her to the hospital, making sure her neck was okay before they moved her. The police came too and asked everyone what happened. They thought it was an accident, but they told Dad they might need to talk to him again. One cop kept looking at him like he didn't believe him. We all went back to Aunt Carol's place, really upset. Dad was a wreck, sure he was going to get arrested for hurting Serena. He kept saying it was an accident. Mom told him the parking lot cameras would prove it and rubbed his back like she used to when I had nightmares. The next day, Dad got a call from the hospital. Serena was okay. She just had a mild headache and a few stitches. She told the police she didn't want to press charges. Dad was happy, but he also didn't really believe it. It wasn't like Serena to just let something go. He started walking around Aunt Carol's living room, waiting for something else to happen. It did later that day when Serena showed up at Aunt Carol's. She had a bandage on her head and a look on her face like she was better than ever before. She said she wouldn't press charges or tell Marcus about what happened if Dad signed over his car to her. It was the only thing he had left, a BMW he'd kept even when he lost everything else. Dad felt like he had no choice. He said he'd do it, and he looked really sad. Mom was mad, telling him Serena was blackmailing him, but Dad just wanted it to be over. He signed the papers Serena had already had ready. His hand was shaking. Then she left with his car keys, looking like she'd just won. We watched her get in Dad's car and drive away fast. That night, Dad called a family meeting. He said he was wrong for choosing Serena over us, gambling away his business, and putting us in this situation. He was almost crying as he said, sorry. He promised to do better and be better. He was starting a new job next week, and he'd be paying Mom back for the child support he hadn't paid. I know, sorry doesn't mean much, he said, looking at each of us, but I'm going to show you from now on. Mom wasn't ready to believe him, but she said he could stay on the couch until he found his own place. It was the beginning. Liam was happy and asked if Dad could take him to the park. Emma didn't say much, but I saw her smile when Dad said he'd help her with her homework. It was weird for a few weeks, but things got better. Dad left for work early and came home late every day. He was tired, but seemed happy to have a job again. He gave Mom most of his first paycheck for back child support, only keeping enough for the bus. He played video games with Liam, helped Emma with her science project, and asked me about my college applications. He was starting to fix things. One night, about a month after what happened at the mall, Dad and I were in the kitchen alone. He was washing dishes, and I was doing homework. It almost felt like things were normal again. He said he was proud of me for standing up to him when he came back, for protecting everyone. He told me I was stronger than he was. I didn't know what to say. I was still angry, and it was going to take a while to get over what he had done. But I knew he was trying, working hard every day to earn our forgiveness. I asked him why our family wasn't enough for him. Why did he need Serena and the money? It's something I was worried about since he walked out. Dad sat down across from me. The kitchen light showed that he had new gray hairs and lines around his eyes. He said that growing up poor made him want something else. When the business took off, he wanted to prove he wasn't poor anymore. He thought Serena was the perfect addition to his new life. She was beautiful, everything he thought he should want. The car, the restaurants, the clothes. He thought it would make him feel better about himself. But it didn't, he said, looking at the table. It didn't make me happy. I just didn't want to admit I was wrong. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Leaving you kids was the worst thing I've ever done. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you if you'll let me. It wasn't a great answer, not perfect by any stretch, but it felt real, you know? For the first time in forever, it felt like I was talking to my actual dad again. Not the imposter who'd skipped out on us, or even that desperate guy who showed up on our doorstep just a month prior. The next day, Dad gets a call. From Marcus, of all people. My stomach dropped when Dad said who it was, thinking, oh no, what now? But the call took a total left turn. Marcus wanted to give Dad a real honest-to-goodness job at his brand new restaurant. Apparently, Dad's hustle to clear his debt had made an impression, and Marcus needed a manager he could actually rely on. You're a man of his word, Marcus had told him, or so Dad said. That's hard to find these days. But Dad turned him down. He told Marcus very politely that he was sticking with his commitment to Trevor. When he hung up, he looked like a weight had been lifted, like he'd just made it through some kind of test. He told us he was done with the easy way out. Slow and steady, the honest route. That was the only way forward, he said. Mom raised an eyebrow. She was a bit unsure, but she gave a small nod anyway. That night, as we were all gathered around the dinner table, I really looked at my family. Mom was worn out from work, but smiling as she passed around the potatoes. Emma was going on and on about her school play, super animated. Liam was actually eating his veggies without complaining, which was a miracle in itself. And Dad, quieter than usual, was just listening intently to Emma's story. It wasn't a storybook ending. There were still hurts from the past, trust that needed fixing. Dad had to earn it day after day, and we knew there would be bumps in the road. But for the first time in years, it felt like we had a shot at being okay. Not the same as before, obviously. That was impossible. But at building something new, maybe even something good, over time. The next couple of months flew by. Dad was true to his word about the job with Trevor. He was working his tail off, sometimes clocking in the 12-hour days just to prove that he was serious. Every Friday, he would hand Mom an envelope filled with money for child support and bills. At first, she tried to refuse it, telling him he should save up for his own place, but he flat out refused. I owe you guys way more than this, he'd say, and leave it on the kitchen counter. The couch situation wasn't great for anybody. Dad's back was killing him, and to be honest, the living room always smelled like his aftershave. Mom had started looking at some 2-bedroom apartments close by that might be cheaper than our current place. The kids could share, she kept saying, never quite mentioning where Dad would be in all of this. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find Dad flipping pancakes, again. This time, I actually ate some. They were pretty passable, even if the edges were a little crispy. We sat there at the kitchen table while everyone else was still asleep. So listen, I found an apartment, he said between bites. It's not far from here, just a studio, but it's clean. I nodded, feeling strangely let down. Part of me had gotten used to having him around all the time. He continued, "Maybe you kids could come over sometime if you want. If you'd like to, of course." He was trying to act cool, but I could tell this mattered big time to him. "Yeah, maybe," I said, suddenly completely absorbed by the syrup swirls on my plate. Dad moved out the following weekend. Liam teared up a little, which made Dad get all misty-eyed too. Emma pretended she wasn't bothered, but I saw her give him that quick hug when she thought no one was looking. Mom even helped him load his stuff into Trevor's truck. They stood talking quietly by the front door for what seemed like forever just before he left. Dad's new place was exactly as depressing as I'd imagined. One room with a small kitchenette in the corner, a bathroom that was smaller than our linen closet back home, and a sad-looking mattress on the floor. He'd hung up a few photos of us, and had a plant by the window that looked like it had seen better days, but he acted like it was the best thing ever when we came to visit, like it was some sign that he was starting over. The first real test came in April, when Emma's birthday rolled around. Dad got in touch to ask if he could come to her party. Mom left it up to Emma. She shrugged and mumbled, "Whatever, it's fine." Not exactly warm and fuzzy, but Dad was ecstatic. He showed up with a wrapped gift and a cake from the fancy bakery that Emma loved. The cake had to have cost him at least half a day's pay. The party was a little awkward at first. Mom's friends kept casting glances in Dad's direction, like they were waiting for him to mess up. Aunt Carol barely said 2 words to him. Dad just kept his head down, helped set up the games, and stayed out of the way. By the end of the night, the tension had faded. I even saw Mom laugh at something he said while they were cleaning up the leftovers. Emma's gift from Dad turned out to be a whole set of artist-quality art supplies. She had been into painting lately, covering her side of the room we shared with watercolor paintings. The look on her face when she opened it, surprise, then real, true happiness, was the first time I'd seen her guard down around Dad since he'd returned. "How did you know?" she asked, gently touching the bristles of one of the paintbrushes. "I pay attention," Dad said simply. After that, Emma started sending Dad texts about her art projects, small victories. Summer arrived, and with it came graduation. I managed to snag a partial scholarship to the state school, which was a huge deal. College had seemed impossible when Dad had left, and Mom was struggling to put food on the table. Now it was actually happening. Dad insisted on buying my cap and gown, even though Mom had already figured it into the household budget. "Let me do this," he told her, "please." The graduation ceremony was hot and long, like they always are. But looking out from the stage and seeing my whole family sitting there, Mom, Emma, Liam, Dad, Aunt Carol, even Trevor, who'd become sort of a family friend, made all those late nights studying completely worth it. Dad took us all out for dinner afterward. Nothing over the top, just the local diner, but he paid for everyone. I noticed he only ordered coffee for himself. Later, I overheard Trevor telling him to order something, that he couldn't keep skipping meals just to save a few bucks. Dad brushed off the comment. That night, Dad handed me an envelope. Inside was $500 in cash. "It's not a lot for college," he said, looking embarrassed. "But it's a start. I'm going to send a bit more every month." I knew how hard he had worked for that money, lifting boxes at the warehouse and counting stock, for barely more than minimum wage. This meant way more than when he just handed me a credit card back in his Serena days. "Thanks, Dad," I said, and I actually meant it. The real shock was a week later. Mom gathered us all in the living room, looking jittery. Dad was there too, which was unusual since it wasn't his regular visit day. "So, your father and I have been talking," she started, glancing over at Dad, "and we've decided to try dating again." Emma's jaw dropped. Liam started bouncing on the couch. You would swear someone had just told him we were going on a trip to Disneyland. I wasn't sure how to feel. "We're going to take it slow," Dad added quickly. "Super slow, one step at a time," Mom said. There weren't any promises, but the look in their eyes, something that had been missing for years, even before Dad left with Serena, was there for me to witness. The first date was pure awkwardness. Dad turned up with flowers. He was wearing a tie that didn't remotely match his outfit. Mom changed what felt like 1,000,000 times before finally settling on her fit. They went to the movies and had dinner, the most basic date ever. Mom came home with glowing cheeks. It was nice, was all she would tell Emma when begged to release full details. The first date was very painful with awkward undertones. They dated weekly for the rest of the summer, usually Fridays, and Liam would come along to make it a family affair. More often, Dad would hang around to do dinner, sticking around to help with dishes during the homework. He and Mom would talk in the kitchen long after we had gone to bed, voices low, offering a murmuring comfort through the walls. Just before I went to college, they gave us a family meeting. He was promoted finally, they told us. Mom revealed about her taking a medical class to become a specialist. Mom looked at Dad for confirmation and said, "What if we got a bigger place?" Liam asked, his eyes widening, and he said, including Dad. Mom confirmed if everyone was on board with it. Emma looked at me for my answer, and I was the oldest. Everyone awaited my response. I thought about all that had occurred. Dad ditched us for Serena. I can't forget those tough years. Then, when he had nowhere else to go, he came back. Add in the gambling debts and the Marcus thing. It was a mess. But slowly, over months, he tried to make up for it, day after day. "Yep," I said at last. "I'm okay with it." The relief on Dad's face was almost too much to bear. We found a rental house with 4 bedrooms, not too far from where we were. It wasn't anything special. The kitchen needed work, and the backyard was just dirt. But there was space for everyone. Dad and Mom would get the master bedroom. Emma and Liam would get their own rooms, finally, and I'd have a room for breaks from college. Moving day, total chaos. Trevor showed up with his truck again, and Aunt Carol helped pack boxes. Even Marcus came by for an hour, bringing pizza and helping Dad move the heavy stuff. Seeing them talk like it was nothing after all that went down was so weird. As I was carrying boxes to my new room, I heard Dad talking to Mom in the kitchen. "They didn't know I was there. I don't deserve a second chance," he said quietly. "I know that." "No, you don't," Mom said, her voice soft but honest. "But you've earned it." I slipped away before they saw me, feeling like I'd stumbled into something private. That night, our first in the new house, we ordered Chinese and ate it on the living room floor since we hadn't set up the dining table. Liam was so excited about decorating his room. Emma was already drawing ideas for a mural on her wall. Mom had even agreed to it. Dad just kept looking around at us, like he couldn't believe his luck. Around 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. Dad answered it and then called for Mom. Their voices were quiet, but I knew something was up. I peeked into the hallway and saw Serena standing there. My stomach dropped. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, her clothes less showy. The cocky attitude was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "I just wanted to drop this off," she said, handing Dad an envelope. "It's what I got for the car. I know it doesn't make up for everything, but..." Dad looked shocked. "You sold the BMW?" Serena nodded. "I'm moving to Portland. Fresh start." She glanced past him and saw me watching. For a second our eyes met, and I saw something like regret there. Then she turned and left. Dad closed the door slowly, staring at the envelope. "What was that about?" Mom asked. "I think," Dad said slowly, "that was an apology." He opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for way more than the car was worth, with a short note. Dad read it silently and then passed it to Mom. She read it, her eyebrows going up in surprise. "Well," she said finally, "people can change." Dad put the check in his wallet. "This is going straight into the kids' college funds," he said firmly, where it should have been all along. Later, I helped Dad put together my bed frame. We worked in mostly silence, the instructions spread out on the floor. It reminded me of when I was little, and we'd build Lego sets together on rainy days. "You know," I said, tightening a bolt, "I never thought we'd be here like this." Dad paused, screwdriver in hand. "Me neither," he admitted. "I thought I'd lost you guys forever. And I would have deserved it." I shrugged, suddenly feeling awkward. "Yeah, well, you're not a total disaster now, I guess." He laughed, the tension gone. A high praise from a teenager. "I'm 18 now," I reminded him. "Technically an adult. God help us all," he joked. But his eyes were serious when he added, "I'm really proud of you. You know, all of you, but especially you. You held this family together when I couldn't." I didn't know what to say, so I just handed him another screw. The next morning, I woke up early to finish packing for college. My room was still full of boxes, but my bed was made, and Dad had put my high school graduation picture on the wall. I looked through the window. I could see him in the backyard with Liam, planning out the garden Mom wanted. Emma came in without knocking as usual. "Mom's making pancakes," she announced, sitting on my bed. "Dad's showing Liam how to build a raised garden bed." "Cool," I said, folding a t-shirt. "Are you okay?" she asked suddenly. "With all of this, Mom and Dad, the new house, everything?" I thought about it for a minute. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think I am." "Me too," she admitted. "It's weird, but good weird." We went downstairs together. The kitchen smelled like coffee and pancakes, and Mom was humming as she flipped them on the griddle. Dad and Liam came in from outside, dirt on their hands and big smiles on their faces. As we all sat down to eat, I understood what normal felt like. Not perfect, not a fairy tale, but solid and real. Dad looked at me across the table and smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I smiled back. Yeah, we were going to be okay. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stories on this channel.